Welcome back to Paranormal Patio. As always, I'm Jason, and I have the usual spiel for you at the beginning of the episode. So if you're just stumbling onto this episode, make sure you find us on Spotify and all of your other favorite podcasting platforms, except for Apple. It's a personal decision, and I'll say it every time. Also, check out our website, paranormalpatio.com, for special articles and every once in a while a little hidden gem. Plus you can find links to the works and websites and ways to contact former guests. And also follow us on social media. We're on Twitter and Facebook. Reach out to us. Let us know what you like, what you don't like, what you'd like to see, all that stuff. If you have any stories that you think are pretty weird and pretty out there, hey, shoot them over and you could be on the next episode. For this episode, we're going international, baby. That's right. We are journeying across the pond to Scotland. And we're going to talk to the content creator, Unexplained Scotland, about some of his videos and experiences. And we'll even dig a little bit into some of the cultural differences between what it's like living in America versus Scotland. We had a really good chat. So without further ado.
You're listening to the Paranormal Patio Podcast. Pull up a chair.
Welcome back to Paranormal Patio. As always, I'm Jason, and we're going international tonight with Unexplained Scotland. Unexplained Scotland is a YouTube channel that I was made aware of mostly through the Eternal Void podcast right around the time that I did an interview with them. At any rate, that's neither here nor there because right now we're here in the Paranormal Patio. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me on. This is going to be really cool.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this for a while because I've had you on the schedule for quite some time, and it's good to finally connect and be able to talk for a little bit.
Yeah, definitely.
So one thing that I think is really cool is that you started your YouTube channel around the same time that this show started. So we're kind of about the same age in that regard.
Oh, yeah. We've been about a year as well, then.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure we started in May, and then your first video was posted in April. So
yeah, almost a year, which is crazy to think about.
Yeah, I know. It's been one hell of a year.
Yeah, it has.
How are you faring with the ongoing pandemic and everything? How's Scotland handling it?
I mean, it could be worse. I got my work where I work, my day job closed in, I think it was about the 27th of March last year. We went back for a couple of weeks in about September, but apart from that, I've basically been off my work for about a year now, which is pretty wild. Yeah.
Is the government taking care of you folks over there as far as financially, or are you kind of on your own?
I gotta say, they've been pretty good. I don't think anywhere is what you'd call perfect, but compared to some kind of reports I've heard, we're doing okay, It could definitely be worse.
Yeah, over here they're arguing about giving us a third check, if you haven't heard.
Oh, man. I didn't know if I wanted to bring that up. I thought that might be a sore spot.
It's really bad for a lot of people. My job, my wife's job, we have been going this whole time. So my life hasn't really changed a whole lot other than, we go out for dinner less. But,
yeah,
we still get up and go to work and come home and do our normal stuff. So it really hasn't affected us personally, which is good. I'm grateful for that. And no one in our family has been sick. So that's really good. We're just kind of rolling with it and,
Yeah, man. Hopefully the end is in sight, but I mean, who knows these days?
Yeah, I've given up on the daily, waiting on bated breath, so to speak. It's just, it'll happen when it happens and we'll be back to normal at some point. If there ever is a normal again. Well, let's get out of the real scary stuff and let's talk about the fun scary stuff. So,
oh, that sounds good.
Yeah. For everyone who hasn't found your channel, tell us about Unexplained Scotland, what the channel is, what you do, why you started, all that good stuff.
Unexplained Scotland is a YouTube channel I started. I think we recorded the first video in March last year. It came out in April, where the idea was I was just going to sit down and tell supernatural weird stories from around Scotland. So, we got ghosts, aliens, UFOs, cryptids, the occult. But I didn't want to just, read them out of a book. So there's some jokes, there's some kind of funny stuff that flashes up on screen. It's edutainment, I'd say,
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. I love your channel. I love your content. It's always entertaining.
No, the reason I started was I was just so bored when lockdown started. Unexplained Scotland originally was we'd go out and film like little recreations and stuff, and we were all ready to go with a new one, but then we were told, you can't travel, you can't go and do anything, so I was just super bored, and I had all these stories, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to sit on a chair and tell them, and thankfully people ended up enjoying it.
Yeah, the chair is quite sharp. Tell us about some of the topics you've covered and maybe what some of your favorite stories are.
Oh, we've covered quite a lot. We've done a few alien ones, or I suppose UFO rather. We did Bonnie Bridge and Zalith, which is a great story. In the early 90s, this small area of Scotland had a weird UFO flap, where the amount of people that were seeing UFOs was astronomical. And eventually the mayor of the town got a message through this guy who may or may not have been a man in black from an intergalactic ambassador called Zalith.
That is just a thing, isn't it?
Yeah, but the mayor took it totally seriously and called a town meeting and all sorts. It really took off. It was pretty bizarre.
And when did you say this happened?
That was the early 90s, so it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, that's unusual that someone with any sort of authority would just take the ball and run with it, with something so outlandish like that.
I really want it to be true. I really hope Zalith did come from outer space and want to talk to the mayor of a small Scottish village. That would just be incredible.
Yes, it would. I love it.
Yeah, it's kind of become a recurring joke, so I like Zalith. I hope he's true. Maybe I could, with psychic energy, morph him into an actual being.
So the first video that you put out was the Gurning Man. And I know that there were a lot of lines drawn with your interview on the Eternal Void about it sort of maybe possibly being an Indrid Cold type of situation. Can you get into that at all?
Yeah, the descriptions of the Gurning Man and Indrid Cold, who I'm sure you know was also known as the Grinning Man or the Smiling Man, are pretty numerous. They're both described as being really tall, really thin, obviously having a weird grin, kind of inhumanly large and creepy. They're both described as wearing tight, shiny clothing, kind of like one-piece catsuits, I guess. The differences would be Indrid Cold was reported as having hair, whereas the Gurning Man was always said to be bald. Also, Indrid Cold would communicate with people, whereas the Gurning Man would just kind of turn up and freak people out for no obvious reason.
And then he would flee, right?
He would disappear into thin air. He'd be either on the street and you'd see him and he'd do something weird, like he'd make a face at you and start running in place and he'd be gone, or you'd wake up and you'd hear a strange noise from the bottom of your bed, you'd look up and he'd be there just smiling and rubbing his chest, then gone.
Weird.
Yeah, it's really creepy. I'm actually gonna redo the Gurning Man episode at some point because I've done a lot more research, I've got a lot more connections, and also because it was the first video, I kind of consider it a bit of a pilot, before we kind of hit the ground running, I suppose.
Yeah. I love it though. It definitely kind of sets the tone for what you plan to do, with the rest of your videos. So it's important, for your channel. Like you said, it was kind of like a pilot, but it really did set the tone for the way that you handled the stories, and I loved it.
Yeah, people seem to really get into it. It was really nice to... I expected to get about 50 views or something, but people really kind of responded to it, which I was surprised and very happy about.
So one thing I do want to ask is the word gurning in your native land of Scotland. What does that really mean?
Oh, gurning is a weird thing. There's like gurning contests and even a world championship of gurning. it's basically contorting your face into like a weird smile, I guess. It's kind of hard to explain, but if you Google it, just Google gurning, and you'll see what I mean. It's pretty bizarre, but yeah, it's got a big following, especially in kind of the older generations.
Do you have any plans on entering the contest the next time it's held, or?
Well, in the video, I try a bit of a gurn, and if you compare mine to some of the world championships, I'm not even in the same league. It's embarrassing.
Is it one of those things though? Like, are you really disappointed that you can't do it? I mean, is that really something that you'd like to be known for?
I mean, I wasn't disappointed I couldn't do it until I realised there was a competition for it, and then I was like, man, if I just had more of a rubbery face, I could really be achieving something.
That's awesome. Another video that I had a little bit of a connection with was the Livingston UFO encounter. And if you want to talk about that, then I'll mention why I'm interested in it.
Oh, sure. The Livingston UFO encounter, I think, is probably my favourite of the UFO stories we've done. The story is, there was this guy, Robert Taylor. I believe it was in the 70s. He was walking his dog through the woods in Livingston, Decmont Law in Scotland. And he came into a clearing and saw this weird metal sphere hovering. He didn't know what it was, so he took a few steps closer to it, and two smaller spheres with little spikes on them, he said they looked like naval mines, dropped from it and started attacking him. But they couldn't really reach him, so they were just like bouncing off his trousers. He smelt something weird, passed out, and when he woke up, he realised he'd been dragged closer to where the big sphere was, but by this point, everything had vanished. So he gathered all his stuff, he got his dog who had stayed by his side, because dogs are amazing, and made his way home. He phoned the police investigated the area, found strange tracks in the ground that they couldn't match to any equipment from any forestry company, and it seemed to just stop, which would be impossible unless it was lifted by some sort of aircraft from above and flown away, which seems like a ridiculous thing to consider.
It does, but there are stranger stories. I mean, that's definitely one of a kind with the mine-shaped, I don't know what you'd call them, expressions of this larger orb. That's not something I've ever heard about before. Yeah,
it's pretty unique. Like, I've read so much UFO encounters from around the world, and yeah, they don't seem to turn up anywhere I've seen. I think they were probably some sort of probe.
Who knows?
It could be anything. That's just my theory, of course.
Sure. Just really the name Livingston resonates with me because in Livingston County, Kentucky, is where the kind of the focal point of my personal research has been for the last year. And anytime I see anything that says Livingston or Smithland specifically, I'm immediately drawn to it because I have to know if there's some sort of a weird connection or if it's the timing of it is something synchronistic. So yeah, whenever that video came out, well, probably about 3 months ago or so, I was like, oh wow, I wonder what this is about. And then it was, totally unrelated. And at the time I couldn't think of anything that lined it up, but it was still a neat little poke in my direction just because it was, Livingston.
Oh man, it would have been so cool if there was some sort of weird, obscure connection.
Maybe there is, and I haven't found it yet.
We might need to look into that.
We may have to. So the last video that you've put up was Morag, the monster of Loch Morar. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Morar.
Morar. And that's basically very similar to the Loch Ness Monster, right? Kind of, you even mentioned, like, kind of jokingly, it's the Loch Ness Monster's cousin.
Yeah, it's kind of Nessie's less popular cousin.
Much less popular, because it's the first time I had heard of such a thing.
Even people in Scotland don't really know about Morag, which is pretty strange because there are quite a lot of sightings and reports, and there was even some research done I mentioned in the video. So,
one thing with the Loch Ness Monster, it's often attributed to Crowley's work there at Loch Ness, and that it may be some sort of leftover artifact from this magical working? And is there any sort of explanation for the monster in Loch Morar?
The only thing I can think of is that it's somehow coming from the same place. I think maybe extra-dimensional was my theory in the video, because it seems to have an impossibly long lifespan, super elusive, and there's never really any physical evidence.
And that's pretty common with these type of things. Even,
yeah, sadly.
all these hundreds of thousands of Bigfoot encounters across the world, and yet there's still no physical evidence. Occasionally a footprint, but they're often debunked. So these creatures aren't leaving any footprints, so to speak. So
yeah,
maybe they are. At the bottom of these bodies of water, there's these weird flipper prints, and we just can't see them.
It would be great to, I guess, have the funding to just go check that out. Do like a full expedition and just dredge the whole lake. It would be amazing. Honestly, if I had the money, it's the type of thing I'd probably do. You can come the loch with me. Oh,
I definitely would. That would be incredible. Absolutely. I mentioned before we started recording that I had this weird little thing that just happened. I had got onto Twitter to kind of shoot you a message, and I had in my Twitter feed there was a post. It was just a link. It's a web link, and I actually retweeted it. It leads to this single-page little article called "Odd Kind of Distemper," and it's this short little write-up about Sarah Dalrymple, Countess of Dumfries. Or Dumfries. I don't know. I'm not from
Dumfries.
There. Dumfries. 1654 to 1744. Have you heard about this?
I don't think I have. This sounds new to me.
Well, maybe you can look into it after we talk. It might be a new episode. Who knows?
It might be. What was the gist of it?
So I'll just read it because it's really short. Sarah Dalrymple was said to have had suffered from a distemper that caused her to fly across the room and around the garden. Was it witchcraft? None could say. Was she definitely 100% flying about? Robert Woodrow was absolutely certain. And there's a little clip from some sort of a book. It says, I am well assured that the Countess of Dumfries, Stairs' daughter, like Stairs, apostrophe S, was under a very odd kind of distemper and did frequently fly from one end of the room to the other, and from one side of the garden to the other, whether by the effects of witchcraft upon her or some other way is a secret. The matter of fact is certain. And there's a little picture of this witch-type character flying across the garden.
This is kind of weird. I've been doing some research on, it's been called the Bargaran possession, and in that, a young girl from around Glasgow is reportedly possessed, and she would fly around her bedroom, like out of the bed and into a wall, which is kind of similar. That's
very similar, actually. And I'm scrolling to the bottom of this post. There's a reference to a book, 2 books, and one of them is Materials for a History of Remarkable Providences, mostly relating to Scotch ministers and Christians, Volume 2, Maitland Club, Glasgow, page 4.
That is a title.
Yeah, well, but yeah, you'll have to check into that and let us know.
Yeah, definitely. I think the Bargaran possession as well, I don't know if it was before or after, but it wouldn't have been too long either way, so it might be around the same time.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
Outside in the patio, it's feeling really great being out here in the warmth.
Oh, I'm jealous.
Well, it's not really warm. It's like 56 degrees, but it's warm for how it's been lately.
It's warm for Scotland.
Yes. And then in a few months it will be 100 degrees here, and we'll all be complaining about the heat.
I would die in that heat, I think. I don't think I could stand that. We actually had a holiday booked to Florida, but we had to cancel it because of COVID.
Oh, you're lucky, because that is just a dreadful place.
I just want to see the theme parks, man.
You and 700,000 other people on any given day.
I know.
My goodness, just piled up on top of each other and sweating and getting angry. No, would that have been your first trip to the States?
I went when I was about 9, so it would have been my first trip in about 20 years.
Did you go to Florida whenever you were 9?
Yeah, me and my parents went.
Yeah, okay. So you kind of have an idea of what it's like.
Yeah, I remember there being a lot of thunderstorms.
Yeah, you can set your watch by the rain, I'm pretty sure, down there, just all that humidity. We went a couple of years ago, and I was miserable. It was the first time I had ever been. I was not happy about it, and I will never go back. Just so humid, hot. Not for me. I love the beach, but I hated everything else about Florida.
I hope I can take it. Like, I do not do well in the heat at the best of times, so.
Well, let's get back to Unexplained Scotland. What is your next video that you're working on? Because it's been about a month, so it's getting about time for a new video to drop.
Oh yeah, well, I was hoping we'd have one out by now, but we kept encountering problems, which I'm putting down to the subject matter, which is an Egyptian curse.
Alright, yep, that's it.
That's it. So it's about this couple from Edinburgh who went on their holiday to Egypt. And while they were there, as a souvenir, they stole a piece of a bone from a skeleton in a sacred Egyptian tomb, took it back to Edinburgh, and of course, ended up with paranormal problems in their house, because of course you would.
Of course you would.
So yeah, every time we tried to film, like, something would happen. You know, the first couple of times it was pretty mellow, just like, you know, something would come up that was just boring everyday stuff that meant we couldn't film. Then we were set up, ready to go, you know, sound, lighting, camera, but my cat kept going crazy, just like running around the place and meowing and clawing at the walls. And for a while I didn't really think about it, just thought, oh, whatever, but then I thought, who did the Egyptians worship? Cats.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. The second time, there was gale force winds, like it was howling outside, the windows were rattling, and it was just impossible to get clean audio. You might saw actually on Twitter, I went out the next day and this old tree had blown down, like roots sticking out the ground.
That's pretty good wind.
Yeah, so I don't know if it was Egyptian curse or just a run of bad luck, but who can say?
I do remember seeing the tweets around that time.
Oh, it was such a pain just trying to get it filmed, just every time something would happen, but it's done now, it's about halfway edited, so I don't know, unless my computer explodes, it should hopefully be out very soon.
So it'll probably will be out before this episode is out, so it'll work out.
Hopefully. Yeah. I don't want to jinx it, but hopefully.
What really got you into weird stories and learning and researching paranormal experiences of other people?
It was just when I was really young, my dad would always put on kind of documentaries about UFOs and ghosts, and I was always just really, really interested into it. Then, of course, the X-Files helped when that came along.
Sure.
Then when the internet kind of became big and we got a computer in the house, it was really easy to just, you know, look stuff up and go on forums and talk about all this kind of stuff with people and read other people's experiences, and, you know, that just got easier and easier as time went on. Then I started picking up books and, you know, reference guides, stuff like that. And yeah, it just kind of grew as an obsession, I suppose, from a very early age.
Have you had any personal experiences?
I've had a couple when I was quite young. The first one would have been when I was maybe, I think, 5 or 6. And it was in my parents' house, the house I grew up in. And I remember I was going up the stairs to see my mum for whatever reason. She was in the bedroom. And I remember when I was walking up the stairs, I got this really bad feeling. And I looked behind me and I saw this human figure, but it was totally black, like a solid black shadow, just a few steps behind me. And it scared the hell out of me, so I ran the rest of the way up, because I got the feeling like, you know, it was coming after me. I ran and told my mom, and she's like, oh, you know, whatever, you're just a kid, it was probably just seeing things. Years later, when I was looking on the internet and I first read about the shadow person phenomenon, I was like, that's exactly what I saw. And it was so crazy to hear that other people had been seeing this kind of thing since forever, really.
Yeah, for a very long time.
What was interesting is, the house I grew up in, there's a church across from it. To the best of my knowledge, where my house is built now used to be on the grounds of it. So I don't know if there's a connection there, but it's certainly a spooky thing to think about.
Yeah, sure. But I mean, and Scotland is a much older country than the United States, and you have some real history over there. So
yeah, it's ancient. You know, sometimes when I'm researching stuff and I'm looking at the dates, and it's just crazy to think about that we had stuff going on that long ago.
So what was one of the other experiences that you had?
A couple of years later, when I was maybe 7 or 8, I was at my grand's house, and outside of my grand's house was kind of like a field and a hill, and me and one of my friends were sitting on it, and we saw this weird kind of silver sphere in the sky, and we stared at it for a while, and I remember thinking that it didn't seem like a really big object far away, but kind of a smaller object quite close. So we stared at it for, honestly, it must have been about 10-15 minutes, and it just kind of hovered there. And then once again, I started getting a really kind of bad vibe off of it. So I covered my eyes for a second, and when I looked back, it was gone. And this was a clear day in the summer, you know, there was no clouds. Like, a plane, you know, a helicopter or whatever, couldn't have just zipped off that fast.
That's really, really interesting. The spherical shapes and the orbs and things, it's really unusual, or not unusual, it's weird that this phenomena so often presents itself as something round and spherical. I've always found that interesting. Yeah,
definitely. It is commonly reported. I say it kind of gave me a bad vibe again. It wasn't really a bad feeling. I think I just kind of thought, I'm seeing something that I shouldn't be seeing, you know, like it shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
Because it was just so outside of my frame of reference, especially at that age.
How do you think you would have handled it if it were to have happened yesterday?
Oh, if it had happened yesterday, I would have been waving my arms saying, you know, abduct me. I need to know.
I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one who feels that way.
No, these days, you know, I would have wanted a much more personal experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think about that sometimes, about, you know, if I was presented with the option of being abducted, you know, I mean, I stand to leave behind my family, but at the pursuit of maybe knowing more, you know, what if I never come back, but what would my life be like at that point?
That's kind of the end of Close Encounters, right? When he leaves his family just to go hang out with aliens, which I would say was the right choice.
I think he made the right choice. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I love it. So do you feel like your interest in this stuff like kind of weighs more to the side of UFOs and aliens, or are you more into cryptids or ghosts, or what's your real specialty?
I would say that kind of the top of the stuff I'm interested in, because I am interested in it all, but I think the top would be UFOs and the occult. I'm really interested in. You know, I look into just about everything, especially in Scotland.
Sure. Do you do much reading or watching with things from the States at all?
Yeah, I'll try and keep up with anything that comes up on Twitter, you know, and I listen to some podcasts, and I follow a bunch of people on Twitter as well, so yeah, I get the kind of stateside spooky news, I guess.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about was the abduction of Travis Walton and the movie Fire in the Sky that was based off of that. Are you familiar with that?
Oh, it's a classic movie, yeah.
Classic. But you never know how things translate to other countries. Like, I have no idea if that's even available, you know, in Scotland, so.
You know, it wasn't for ages, because the first time I saw it, I think I had to download it, because you could not get a DVD that was the correct region to play here. I can't remember what I was doing, but I was out one day, I think I was buying new headphones, and at the counter, they had Fire in the Sky, and it was like £3 with any purchase. And I was like, when did this happen?
That's an odd thing to happen.
So obviously I had to get it and rewatch it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of my favorites. It was one of the earliest, like more scary paranormal things. I was lucky enough to have basically been born into Ghostbusters, and my cartoon watching days really began with the real Ghostbusters cartoon.
Oh, another classic.
So that was really kind of what I feel like put me on the path early on. But yeah, Fire in the Sky was a totally different thing. I remember watching that whenever it came out on video. I was still really young, but that really put me into, well, this stuff can be like really scary too. And then just last year or maybe 2 years ago, I saw the actual documentary that someone had filmed with Travis Walton talking about it. It's called Travis, I think. Pretty accurate to the movie, which is even scarier, really.
Yeah, I haven't seen the documentary. I'll need to try and check that out. Yeah, because the whole story is really, really interesting.
Absolutely. I mean, the movie's not 100% correct, but, whenever it says based on true events, you can pretty much just assume that, like, there was a cat that had the same name and the rest of it's made up. But this one was actually pretty spot on. There was a little bit more to what he remembers during the abduction, and it's laid out a little differently. Obviously, they had to stylize it a little bit, but
how accurate was the abduction scene?
So when he actually is taken or hit with the beam of light, that's really accurate. And then when he awakens, he's already like surrounded by these beings. So the whole zero gravity cocoon honeycomb sort of thing that happens in the movie did not happen. He was incredibly weak and just grabbed the nearest thing that he could see as some sort of an instrument. And I'm wanting to say he said that he struck one of these things, but it couldn't have hurt because he was so weak and was barely able to swing his arm. And then he kind of scared them off, and they left him in this room, and he saw there was an open door. And he went into this door, into this hallway. He saw another open door. He ran to that, and there was just this basically empty room that had like a chair in the middle. I don't remember if there was some sort of screen that had like a star map on it, or if he could just see pictures of stars. And as he's standing there trying to figure out what in the world is going on with him, basically what looked like just a human person came in and grabbed him and drug him off, wouldn't speak to him, didn't harm him in any way, but just kind of grabbed him, corralled him, took him to another room that had, I'm wanting to say, another one or two of these humanoid type people. And he could see basically like a hangar that had several different craft in it. And then he basically woke up and realized that he was stranded in the middle of nowhere and found a phone and called his brother, I think. So that part's a little different. So in the movie, he calls his friend, but yeah, really crazy story.
I remember the first time I watched the movie, and I remember the first kind of bulk of it is, kind of a mystery, like where did he go? Was he really abducted by aliens? And then they hit you with that abduction scene, and it really goes from like 0 to 100.
It really does. They did a good job telling the story, I think. The way they had it laid out, the way that they cut in like the memories he was having, it was a good story, for sure.
Underrated classic, I would say.
Absolutely. It's amazing that there's so many people that are into this stuff that haven't seen it or even heard about it.
Yeah, go to a shop. It might be at the counter for a couple of minutes.
That's so crazy that is how you were able to actually finally purchase it. That's nuts.
Yeah, it just came out of nowhere, it seemed.
Did they have other movies there too, or is it just this one?
I think there were some other ones. I don't think it was anything kind of interesting, though. It was. I just saw the cover, and I was like, that's Fire in the Sky. There's no way that's actually the movie that I've never been able to get.
That's crazy. I love that. So that's awesome. Personal experiences aside and Fire in the Sky aside and that crazy story, which is awesome. Tell us some more about your channel, some more of the videos that you've done.
So like I say, we've done UFOs, cryptids. I kind of told you 2 of those. We've also got a few videos on, we've got poltergeists, and we've got one on Aleister Crowley and his time in Boleskine House on the shores of Loch Ness, which I think is my favourite video so far. That was when he went to Boleskine to do the Abramelin ritual to try and contact his guardian angel. He did most of the ritual, freaked out everyone in the area, then just kind of left the house swarming with the demons he had summoned. I think most people know eventually Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin bought the house and moved in for a little bit. Apparently he never came back after he heard a head rolling down the hallway and it freaked him out too much. But he left his friend as a caretaker and he stayed there for about 20 years and he had a few weird experiences. But what I love is he never moved out and he was never that worried. The only thing that annoyed him was Led Zeppelin fans and Crowley fans trying to come and visit.
Yeah, there's some crazy stuff. Like, was it David Bowie or somebody who was like terrified and had like some sort of like protection, like mystical protection or something, right?
Yeah, so in Bowie's occult / coke-addled days, which would have been around when he recorded the amazing Station to Station album, Jimmy Page wanted to hang out with him, or so the story goes, and the idea was Jimmy only wanted to hang out with Bowie because Bowie knew all the best drug dealers. But Bowie was super into the occult and knew that Jimmy Page was as well, and he was worried he was going to try and curse him or do some nefarious black magic stuff to him. So he said, you can only hang out with me if you give me a bottle of your urine and some of like your finger and your toenails. And apparently he just kept all that in his fridge.
Yeah.
Along with his milk and peppers, which was the only thing he ate for a whole year.
Just Bowie bizarre.
I love him so much.
To go off on a little bit of a tangent to that, I was probably 5 years old. My aunt and uncle, they had just had their daughter, my cousin, and they lived in this little house that's just, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes away from where I am right now. It's since caught on fire and burned down. It's probably the best thing that's ever happened. As a kid, this house, I could tell there was something off about this house. It was really weird. I always felt like there was somebody watching me in there, and so did everybody else in the family. I remember, we would talk about how scary this house was, and they had a few weird experiences in there, and I don't know if I've talked about them on the show before or not, so I won't. I'll spare everybody, and if I go back and listen and I haven't, maybe in the future I'll get into it. But the upstairs of this house had 2 bedrooms and a bathroom, and there was just 1 bedroom downstairs. And like I said, my cousin had just been born, so she was in a crib in the same room as the stairwell. It was just kind of like a really big hallway. It was a weird room. And so when they finally opened up the upstairs, they were really shocked to find out that the bigger bedroom upstairs had been untouched since the last tenant had died in his bed.
No way.
The blankets were still where they found him. Like, they just pulled the blankets off of him and got him out of the bed and left it. And they're going through this closet and they found jars of urine and bags of hair and toenails and fingernails.
Oh man, that is the intro to a horror movie, I think.
It absolutely is. Yes. I remember we had a family Christmas there. Yeah, I was just terrified the entire time. And I had no real basis of ways to reason any of it because I was so young. But it was terrifying. I didn't like being there.
Just like a really bad feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, now, like a couple years ago, or maybe last year, the house actually caught on fire. I don't think anybody was harmed, so that's good. And the house is gone now. So, and in true American passion and patriotism, the grounds where the house once stood is now a firearms and ammunition store. So, rock on, America.
Oh man, see now that's what you don't want. You don't want to build a firearms store on a haunted site because poltergeist with guns is just not a good combination. No,
it's not. But probably dealing with some weird stuff out there. I haven't stopped in to ask.
No, I wondered, did they ever find out why the guy was keeping his urine and his hair and stuff?
To the best of my knowledge, no. Like I said, I was young, so if they did find some like really macabre story out about it, like I would have probably not heard it. But I do remember being with them once when they went to the landlord's house to pay the rent. I don't know why I remember that. It's not really relevant to anything, but I don't know that they ever even asked about it. I would have.
So did they have to get rid of all that stuff themselves?
Yeah.
Oh man.
Well, I mean, I assume they did. I don't really remember. I know I was upstairs at least a few times, but I can't remember being upstairs without the stuff that had been left behind. So maybe they never did.
Oh man, I'm just thinking, like, if I moved in somewhere and I found that, I'd just like, man, what do I even do with this? Like, do I recycle the bottles? Like, I don't want to deal with any of this.
I think I would forego the recycling, and I probably would just move. You know, and they did. They didn't live there for very long, and I don't know if that was, you know, financially related or they found somewhere better or what the story was. So like I said, I was really young, and my aunt has since passed away, so I can't even ask her. But it was definitely a creepy house, and you know, the jars of urine and the fingernails thing with Bowie. That always, like, as soon as I heard that, I was like, yeah, that's weird. I can relate to that.
It probably made total sense, you know, if you stayed up for about 5 days doing cocaine and read nothing but magical text. It probably connects in your head.
Yeah, there's definitely some motivation there, I'm sure. But we'll never know. I don't think I could handle 5 days of cocaine, so not even to answer brilliant questions about jars of urine. But anyway, so let's get back to the Boleskine stuff. And I remember seeing an interaction between you and Marco Visconti talking about the house around the time that the video had come out, or maybe a little before or a little after. Was
this when I was asking if Crowley ever went back to Boleskine?
Yeah, I think it was, yeah.
Yeah, that was crazy. So it was a little bit after the video came out, but my girlfriend Laura, who does kind of all the technical stuff on Unexplained Scotland, got me a biography on Crowley for Christmas that I was reading. And in it makes it sound like he came back to Boleskine, you know, once or twice, just really briefly. So I asked on Twitter if anyone knew if he did, or, you know, if they could find out I know he had like his confessions book, and there's been a million biographies written on him. And Chris from the Eternal Void tagged some Phelamites in it. And by the morning, one of the guys had a brick from Boleskine and was doing divination over it to get an answer, which I thought was just awesome. Yeah,
I remember that too. That was that Freighter F Disc?
I believe it was, yeah.
Yeah. And then I do remember Marco Visconti chiming in something along the lines of that whoever owns it now is a part of the OTO, and they perpetuate lies about it or something along those lines to get people to like live in fear of it or something. I don't remember the exact conversation. Yeah. A bit more recently, there were some guys from, I think it's called like the Boleskine Preservation Society, who were talking a bit about it, and I suppose kind of what's going to happen to it now that it's being rebuilt after its, you know, third fire or something. So what's going on there then? The last I heard was they were going to try and rebuild it as some sort of kind of like bed and breakfast or hostel with maybe a leaning towards occult tourism, but I don't know how much of that is true. I'm not even entirely sure who owns it right now, to be honest. I bet Marco knows. Oh, he will. The minute this goes out, there'll be a bunch of replies. That's Marco and his secrets. Marco's a really good guy, an incredibly knowledgeable guy. So anything that he says, you can pretty well take to the bank. I always feel really nervous when people like that say, watch my video on Crowley, because I'm like, oh man, they're going to point out everything I got wrong. I like to think I know a bit, but compared to, you know, some of these guys, I really know nothing. Yeah, I feel that way every day. Every day. I remember reading something, and it might have been something you posted or something someone replied with, or maybe just in my own research, about there supposedly being a tunnel from the house to a cemetery that's nearby. Yeah, there is a rumor that there is a tunnel that goes from Boleskine House to Boleskine Graveyard. I'm not exactly sure how far apart those two places are. So I don't know if it would be kind of a small, short tunnel or if it goes for miles. But apparently that is a rumour, and of course went with that. People were saying, at the time anyway, Crowley would go to the graveyard at midnight and steal corpses to do his rituals with, which, I don't know. I don't think so. Yeah. There's a lot of overblownness with a lot of Crowley stuff.
I bet he loved the rumor, though.
Oh, sure, absolutely. People like to just associate weird, crazy things that happen around the same time to him, I've noticed. One of the weird things that's come up with Crowley in my research is, we've talked about it before, but I'm gonna reiterate because it's just, I laugh every time. So in the early 1900s, he actually came to Kentucky, and between myself and Nathan, we have discovered that he actually had relatives in Livingston County. His mother's brother came to the United States and married a woman from like 3 hours away from me, and they moved across the river to Kentucky. They're buried there like they lived their whole lives there. Doing this research and talking to Nathan, like a day later, Chris from the Eternal Void makes this weird post from his bathtub on Twitter, a little article from the book Inhumanoids, where there's a story about the Livingston County Goat Man. This is the same area, and there was this iron furnace back in the 1800s that had burned so hot for so long that the people in the area believed that it had burned all the way through the earth into hell, and this Goat Man was some sort of demon that had come from it to wreak havoc. And this is around the same time, or a little before, Crowley would have been in Kentucky and in the area. So Nathan made this funny joke about, Crowley comes to Kentucky and he's telling everybody he's the beast, and they're like, oh no, the beast is over there by the red hole, the iron furnace. That's the real beast. So that cracks me up every time.
Man, that is so metal.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Are there still reports of a goat man in the area?
So I talked to a guy, and he thinks that a lot of the stories about the Goat Man were to scare people away from hiding spots in the woods where all of these moonshiners were, and they were making all this moonshine. And so
that's elaborate.
Yeah, like they made up the story about this Goat Man and kept all the people away from the area. Now, I mean, it's plausible for sure.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
To my understanding, there are still occasional sightings of this Goat Man. What was the other video that you brought up that you wanted to talk about?
Oh, so I did a video on a poltergeist. Actually, it's a Christmas special.
Yes.
Which was the Ringcroft poltergeist, which I point out in the video has a lot of similarities to the Bell Witch from America.
Yeah.
So it was this farm in Scotland that had this weird kind of entity living in it that would throw stones at people, set things on fire, mess with the cattle, and eventually would even communicate with people. Multiple people had found like bones and teeth and an envelope with blood under a slab by the door. So there's a theory it might have been some sort of curse. They eventually managed to get rid of it by having a group prayer in the barn where a big mass of kind of black shadow and cloud built up before leaving. By the time they'd got rid of it, though, it had burnt down the house and just about everything else on the land. The only thing there now is a dead tree, which I'm really hoping I can go visit at some point, because that is super cinematic.
Yeah. You remarked that it was similar to the story of the Bell Witch. Have you seen the documentary The Mark of the Bell Witch from Small Town Monsters?
No, I've only listened to some podcasts on the Bell Witch, actually, but I'll definitely check that out.
Yeah, I had Seth Breedlove, who runs Small Town Monsters, on the show not that long ago. I was kind of hoping we'd get more into it, but we kind of just talked about his work in general. Maybe in the future we can have him back on, but the Bell Witch story is pretty interesting, and it is very similar to the Ringcroft poltergeist. It's almost dead on, actually.
Yeah, like, basically, word for word, beat for beat, it seems to mirror the Bell Witch.
I wonder in the future if at some point, like, every possible paranormal experience will have happened and we'll just start getting repeats, It'll
either be that or it'll get more and more mind-meltingly surreal.
That'd be terrifying, wouldn't it?
Oh, yeah.
I think I kind of look forward to that, actually.
Yeah, that'd be my preferred one.
That'd be really cool. With your interest in the occult, obviously you've probably dove into Lovecraft a little bit, right?
Oh, yeah, I'm a big fan.
How popular is the whole Cthulhu mythos over in Scotland?
But it's quite popular with, I suppose, the people I hang around with. We all play D&D and even the Call of Cthulhu RPG game. So, yeah, in certain crowds it's pretty big. I don't think the bulk of people really know who Lovecraft was or about kind of the mythos he created.
There's a lot of occultists, practitioners of magic who have really adopted these elder gods and creatures into their practice, and there's actually a lot of magical work involving summoning them to our world. There was a group in Cincinnati, Ohio, that did a lot of work with this, and it's really fascinating that it's been incorporated really into like the knowledge base of magic. It's really weird that it's creepy, so it makes sense, but I wonder how accurate is a poor choice of words, but for lack of terminology, like how accurate these entities are to their counterparts in the Lovecraft stories.
I remember I was reading, this was a while ago, it was kind of a biography of, I guess, Satan and Satanism in popular culture, and Anton LaVey took so much from Lovecraft and kind of the rituals he described in his short stories for his satanic church.
Yeah.
Just wild, really.
Even when I had Marco Visconti on the show back around Halloween last year, he told a story about the time a friend of his and himself tried to evoke Dagon and the whole crazy story with that. That was the first time that I had really heard about any like practical, modern day magic that's kind of calling back to Lovecraft. It's really interesting. I
suppose it's kind of connected to, I've read a bit into chaos magic. It very much says, you could really use whatever you want, even, characters from sci-fi or fantasy. So, I don't see why you couldn't try and bring Cthulhu about.
I don't know why anyone would want to.
He's just misunderstood. He's a good guy at heart, I think.
Yeah. My friends and I actually also play the Call of Cthulhu game. It was the first game when we decided we wanted to play role-playing games together. I kind of took the reins and I was like, well, you guys want to play this Call of Cthulhu game. None of us had really, like a couple of us had played Dungeons and Dragons at that point, but we were all adults, like we didn't play it as children. I'm not really into the fantasy stuff. I don't really want to do Dungeons and Dragons, but I'd be interested in coming up with some stories for this Call of Cthulhu game and just make it like a horror type of game. And everybody was on board, so I started writing all these stories, and we played a campaign that was about 2.5 years long, all interconnected. And I'm pretty proud. I'd like to figure out a way to kind of retell that story for everybody instead of just like the 7 people that are involved.
Yeah, I can always get that feeling as well, that I want to maybe write it down and share it with everyone, especially if it went really well. The guys I played with, we'd just been playing Dungeons and Dragons for years, so when I said I was going to run Call of Cthulhu, they were still kind of in that mindset where, we'll just kick in the door and fight everyone inside. They learned pretty quickly that's not how Call of Cthulhu works.
Yeah, that is not what you want to do.
It was a lot of fun.
Well, before I let you go, where can people find your content?
I'm on YouTube as Unexplained Scotland. I'm also on Twitter as Unexplained Scotland, or Instagram as Contractual Obligation if you want to keep up with me. Contractual Obligation. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I know that it is getting really late where you are, being in Scotland, and it's actually only, 5 o'clock in the evening for me, but you're probably about ready to slip into the old pajamas. And I gotta say, I'm glad this is an audio thing because I am in my pajamas currently. I love it. I love it. Perfect. That's what's awesome about audio podcasts, man. You can not even wear pants if you didn't want to. I wish you told me that before we started. My mistake.
Until next time, keep the fire going.